Hello! Alright, today we're going to be doing 6.8 two-step inequalities. So we have been doing one step with addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Today we're going to be working on two steps, just like we did with two-step inequalities. So, solving two-step inequalities, just like with equations, you're going to use the inverse operations to undo it. So it's kind of like doing the opposite of orders of operation, right? So with orders of operation, you have your grouping symbols, then your exponents, multiplication and division, and then addition and subtraction. You're going to find where your variable is and see what's happening to it. If something's being added to it, you're going to undo, or subtracted, you're going to do the addition and subtraction first, then work with your multiplication and division. So let's get started on this one here. I see 3x plus 4 is greater than 16. So here's my variable is 3x. Okay. The first step is I need to undo this, get rid of this plus 4 here. So to undo that, I subtract 4 on both sides. So this is the first step, is subtract 4. Okay. So then I'm left with 3x is greater than equal to, and then 16 minus 4 is 12. And then the second step, now I see that it's multiplying, so to do multiplying 3 times x, I'm going to undo it by dividing by 3. So 3 times x, so I'm going to divide the left side by 3 and the right side by 3. Since it is positive, I do not need to flip the signs. I'm left with an x on the left, and then greater than or equal to, and then 12 divided by 3, which is 4. Okay? So my solution is x is greater than or equal to 4. Let's go on to the next problem. Here are our next two problems, so let's go ahead and solve this first one here. I see 5 plus 4x is less than 33. Okay, so I'm seeing that this is 4 times x, and then I'm seeing I'm adding a positive 5. So I'm going to start with my addition and subtraction, or my positive 5 first, right? So I need to take away that positive 5, so I'm going to subtract 5 on both sides of the inequality, not under the 4x, okay? So then I'm left with 4x, and then that's less than, you keep the same sign, we're not changing anything yet, and then 33 minus 5 is 28, okay? And then now I need to solve. So now I'm back to a one-step inequality. So I have 4 times x, so use the inverse. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide by 4. So I'm left with an x on the left side, or 1x on the left side, right? Because 4 divided by 4 is 1, is less than 28 divided by 4, which is 7. So the first step here was subtract 5. The second step was divide by 4. Okay? Let's look at this one. This one's a little bit different, and we'll compare the two. So I see a 7, and then minus 2x is greater than 11. So I need to see what's being added to it. So I have a positive 7. So that's where I'm going to start first. I don't start where my variable is or what's being multiplied. So I'm going to subtract the 7 first on both sides of the inequality. So I'm left with negative 2x is greater than, and then you just do 11 minus 7, which is 4. Now I'm back to my one-step inequality, right? So I have a negative 2x is greater than 4, so I'm going to divide by negative 2. Because I'm dividing by a negative 2, that is going to flip my sign, okay? So my sign's going to flip, and then this would be an x, and this would be negative 2. Now, I just want to briefly explain why it is a negative. So if I have here negative 2x is greater than 4, right? If I add 2x here and add 2x here, I get 0 is greater than 4 plus 2x, and then I subtract 4. Okay, so then I would get 2x and then a negative 4. And then do you see how the x is, the the inequality is pointing to the 2x, that's the same thing. We want it pointing to the 2x. So we'll get the same sign, or the same answer, which is x is less than -2. So it's pointing to the x here, and it's pointing to the x. That's why it works, okay? So what's the first step? Well, the first step was I subtracted 7, and the second step was I divided by -2. And then you could say flip the sign, because it's negative, right? You only flip the sign if you multiply or divide by a negative. Let's go on to the next one. All right, here's our next problem. I have 2x plus 1 is less than 11, and then we have a fraction over here, so it's a little bit different, okay? So let's go ahead and solve this. So I'm going to, I see 2x and I see plus 1, so I'm going to subtract 1 here. We start with addition and subtraction first, okay? So then I have 2x is less than 10. Now I'm at multiplying, so I undo it by dividing, so divide by 2. This is a giant 1. So I get x is less than 10 divided by 2 is 5. Okay? Now if we were to graph this, remember with less than, it's an open circle. And then it would be going, anything less than it would be going to the left, right? So this would be an open circle, so I don't color it in, at 5, and it goes to the left. Okay? All right, for this one, I'm going to rewrite it. All right, so I have here x divided by 2 minus 5. Well, I'm going to start with the subtracting 5. So the opposite of subtracting 5 is add 5. So I'm going to add 5 both to both sides of the inequality. So you do it 1 on the left side of the inequality or the sign, and then 1 on the right. So then I have x over 2, 5 minus 5 is 0, and then I have less than, and then negative 8 plus 5. Well, my signs are different, so subtract in your head, you get 3, and then there's more negatives, negative 3. Okay, or you can start on the number line, negative 8 plus 5. All right, next step. Now, I see that I have x divided by 2. Well, what's the opposite of dividing? Multiplying. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. Now, it's a positive 2, so I don't need to flip the sign. So this will cancel out, so I'm left with x is less than, and negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. And that is my solution, is x is less than negative 6. All right, so I have x divided by 2 plus 9 is greater than or equal to 5, and then we're going to be solving and graphing these, okay? So when I see x divided by 2, okay, and then I add 9, where do I start? Do I start by multiplying by 2, or do I start by adding 9? It's easiest if we start with this adding 9 and getting rid of it, okay? So I'm going to subtract 9 on both sides of the inequality. So I have x over 2 is greater than or equal to negative 4. Subtract in your head, larger sign, right? All right, so now I have negative 2, or x over 2. So that means it's dividing by 2, so the inverse is multiply by 2. So I'm going to multiply by 2 here, and multiply by 2. So I get x is greater than or equal to negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. So to graph, I would have negative 8 here. I have, this is a closed circle because it is equal to it. So that means it can equal negative 8. So I'm going to have a circle here and color it in. It's closed, and it says x is greater than it. So anything greater, so that would be like a 0, a negative 7, negative 6, negative 5, and so forth. So it would be negative 9, negative 10. And then I'm going to bold my arrow. All right, let's go on to this problem here. Okay, see what you can do first. Where would you start? Would you start with the 8, the x divided by 3, or the 7? I hope you chose the 8, Okay, so it's a positive 8, so we need to undo that. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 8 on both sides. These 8s will go away. Keep this sign here because it belongs to it. So I have a negative x over 3, or I could put the negative on the 3. It doesn't matter. It's just like this one number is negative right now. Okay, is less than or equal to 7 minus 8 is negative 1. All right, I want to get rid of that negative to make this x positive. So I am now going to multiply, because it's divided by 3, or you can say it's divided by negative 3. I'm going to multiply by a negative 3, so that the negatives will cancel out. Okay, I'm going to multiply by a negative 3 here. Now remember, when I multiply by a negative, I got to switch the sign. So I'm going to do that before I forget about it. All right, so I have a negative 3 divided by a 3, negative 3 here. So I'm going to actually move this so you can see that that can be moved. So a negative divided by negative is a positive, so that gives me a positive x. And then a negative times a negative is a positive, so a negative 1 times a negative 3 is a positive 3. So I need to graph this, so this is going to be closed because it's equal to it. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a circle, color it in, write a 3. 4, 5, 6, 2, 1, 0, negative 1. All right, so which way does it go? X is greater than or equal to 3. That means that it's going to be like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So it's going to go to the right. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next one. Here's our last problem. Let's go ahead and read it together. It says, halfway through the bowling league season, Stewart has 34 strikes. He averages 2 strikes per game. Write and solve an inequality to find out how many more games it will take for him to have at least 61 strikes. What does the solution mean? Let G represent the number of games he needs to bowl. So we have 2 strikes per game. He has right now 34 strikes, okay? And he wants at least 61, okay? And then G is going to represent the number of games, okay? So he's got 2 strikes per game, so it's 2 times G. Plus he's got the 34 strikes already, but it's at least 61 games. So that's going to be at least 61. It can be equal to it, right? Oops. At least 61 here. Yeah, so it has to be, he wants this to be greater than 61. So I actually need to do it this way. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and change the 34. So I need to subtract 34 on both sides. So I get 2G is greater than or equal to, I have 11 minus 4, 7, and then 27, okay? Now I have to divide 27 in half. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my inequality here. So I divide by 2 on both sides. So I get G is greater than or equal to, and then 27 divided by 2. Well, what's 26 divided by 2? That's 13, right? So it's going to be 13 and then a half, and then 1/2, okay? So he needs to have at least 13 and a half games, right? It says, what's the question? How many more games will it take for him to have at least 61 games? Well, it's going to be 13 and a half games, but he's not really going to do, well, I mean, I guess you can have 13 and a half games that he can get 61 strikes, but he won't play just half of a game, right? Right, so that is your solution, is G is greater than or equal to 13 and a half games. So he has to at least play, in order to do that, he has to play 14 games, at least, I guess, 14 games to get 61 strikes. All right, that's the end of the two-step inequalities. I hope you guys are all doing well. Bye!